Hello everybody, I am Dreadscythe, and welcome to Development Hell number 8, December 2020 quarterly feedback. For those who are keeping track, playing the home game, this really should actually be Development Hell number 9, but unfortunately I did not get to do a quarterly feedback last time around because I had a cough that lasted 4 weeks. And it would not have been pleasant to hear me coughing every 30 seconds while doing a DevL article. And I did not feel like recording a video while coughing and then having to go through the editing process of removing all those said coughs and everything else. Also, there wasn't a lot in the last quarterly feedback, and I feel a lot of what I would have said was said by other people in the community, so that was okay for me to skip that one out. This one, however, is a chunky boy, and we need to go through it. So, again, this is Diablo IV quarterly update for December 2020. It starts off with an intro by our game director, Luis Barriga. Barriga, if I'm saying that right. And basically stating, the whole what itemization is, the team goals, what it is that items are supposed to be doing, all that kind of introductory kind of stuff. And then at the end of it, there's a last little paragraph if you missed it while reading it yourself. Excuse me while I drink the morning coffee. Says that the next update, which would be the Q1 2021 update, will actually not be a blog. It will be during BlizzConline as a presentation, and drops a not so subtle hint at what we should be expecting at minimum, which is an updated campfire scene, which essentially is telling us that we're going to get at least our 4th playable class, potentially 4th and 5th, who knows. Lastly, kind of leading off with that they're paying attention to the forums or social media outlets, so give your feedback. That's something we usually, all of us, say at the end of these things, but also doesn't hurt to say it at the beginning. Whether you like it, hate it, or in between, give your feedback. This is the time to give it while they're in the early stages versus when the closed beta is here and it takes 10 times longer to do what you want them to do. So the time is now. Make your voices heard. That's it for now. Yes, so he says that, ends off with his little intro, and then hands it off to Joe Shelley, who goes into the 3 bullet points that they have here, which are, first we want to strengthen the class identity by providing intuitive fantasy hooks. Items and skills that lean into the fantasy of your class are best. Sorcerers should be aiming for staves and wands, maybe some daggers. Barbarians should be going for the bigger weapons because that just seems fit. Druids, staves or maces potentially, whatever kind of fits the fantasy. It doesn't make sense for a wizard or sorceress to be running around with a 2-handed blade. Unless they're hybrid classing, but then again, we're getting D&D and not Diablo 4. But yeah, so that's what they're going around with for there. Second, we want to support deeper customization through our itemization. Items should support and enhance your class, not define it. That is huge, because this one line, if they really stick to it and really carry through the rest of the development of Diablo 4 through closed beta and into the game life cycle itself, it shows that they truly understand that the problem of sets and legendaries being confined to basically being fillers for sets, at least in the context of what Diablo 3 has become, that one line shows that we understand what we did, we understand what we need to do. So this one line, even though it sounds simple, from my point of view, as I've always said, Sets are a problem only because they became the balancing point of the game, not the classes themselves. At least in the context of Diablo 3, and then legendaries became supplemental fillers for sets rather than their own unique flair for the class. You could see how Diablo 3 kind of went off the rails very quickly as far as the itemization and how deep it was. But this, like I said, this one line is huge. And even with other things in this post that we'll go over, I'm finally feel this is weird because this is kind of like a conclusion thought, but I feel the need to say it up front. It's like this post is probably the first post for a quarterly update that I felt so much better reading it, digesting it, taking it in, even though I'm not happy. I shouldn't say not happy. I shouldn't say not ecstatic with everything that's in here, but I feel so much better knowing with what they're doing, with all the examples they gave, and how everything is working together. That's the critical thing, how things are working together. So I'm really happy with that second line there. And then we'll wrap it up quickly with, finally, we're landing on overall depth somewhere between Diablo 2 and Diablo 3. We aim to provide years of discovering countless ways to build the class. And this is where it kind of gets, like, odd, because I've seen people having knee-jerk reactions like, oh, that's not enough. And it could be true, but then again, they're bringing in they're changing how legendaries work, and we'll hit on later. They're bringing back uniques, which we'll touch on later. Mythics are still in a, I guess, rediscovery stage, like trying to figure out what they want mythics to be, but they're still planned to be in the game. Sets, even though they're not mentioned at all in this blog post, are still a thing. They're still looking at it. And then we have no idea what crafting is going to be and how deep crafting is going to be, let alone seasonal themes or how seasons are going to work out, let alone the fact that we have talents now with the passives. So there's a lot there. There's a lot to digest, and I don't think we can necessarily say, okay, well, we're not reaching PoE levels, therefore it's not good enough. Quite frankly, I don't want to approach PoE levels, because at that point you definitely need a third-party calculator to do anything. I like the phrase from the Diablo 3 development team a long time ago, which was concentrated impact. Everything that's in the game should have impact. It should have meaning. And once you start watering things down just to have more things in there, you kind of dilute everything. So that's something to be cautious of and to keep in your mind as we go through these podcasts as well, not podcasts, these blog posts, and head into the future. Always keep that in mind. So with that, Joe Shelley talks about the skill tree and how the previous example, which if you need a reminder, right there. Granted, they've probably done a few iterations since then, so take the preliminary image with a grain of salt. In that they've figured out, okay, they're talking about respeccing on how in the beginning stages it'll be easier to do it, in the later stages it'll be harder, which will be a balancing act, because most builds will take at least halfway through the development to figure out, is this going to be good, is this going to be bad, and then you may need to do something drastic. We just want to make sure we avoid the whole thing like, I really screwed up this character, there's no salvaging it, I have to build a new character, shift over gear. So that's something that has to be thought of while developers are going through here. That's my only real concern, but until we see what the updated skill tree looks like and how it plays out, how the pathing works and your selections, how all that works, we'll have to wait for that. Next is they talk about the primary stats, and this is where I personally feel a little bit of vindication. not because I despise angelic power, demonic powers, and ancestral power, but the way it was implemented, at least from the images and how the power stat being the actual angelic power or demonic power, that was my reference, versus the power affix, which was like the threshold, which was like, like 20% cold resist requires 20 angelic power. That's what I refer to as the power affix. They were both on gear, and I saw that being terrible for the itemization game, because you'd have to have half your stash full of rares and everything just to make it work. Just so when you got like a really good like legendary and you put it in, you lose 20 angelic power, and 2 or 3 of your power affixes are dead now. It's like it kind of takes away from that discovery and getting that really cool legendary to realize, oh, my build is actually weaker somehow. Like I understand trade-offs, but we can't force so many meaningful choices on us that we can't make one. We have to find that balance. So in this post, they talk about several things, being one that the angelic power, demonic power, and ancestral power are gone. They're dead. They're not there anymore. They have brought back the more traditional D&D style, Diablo 1, Diablo 2 style stats. So they have strength, intelligence, willpower, and dexterity. And when you level up, as you see in the GIF, you get 5 stat points, 5 skill points. Again, all subject to change. And each one of the stats will do something differently for your class. So we go down to the next image. So for the barbarian, strength increases skill damage by a certain percentage and increases defense by a certain amount. But for the sorceress, increases defense by a certain amount. So the stat will do something different for each class, rather than the same thing for each class that Diablo 3 has. And Diablo 3 is really rudimentary, because it used to be the dexterity classes got dodge, where the strength classes got armor, and the intelligence classes got all resist. But it's just either armor, because the dexterity classes got switched over to armor versus dodge. So it's either armor, or all resist. So it's pretty damn boring when you compare it to even something like this. This is a huge change from Diablo 3 in comparison. And when you look at the percentages, these characters are supposedly level 21 right now. Supposedly 21. They are 21. What I mean is that they're about halfway leveled, because the level cap, as far as we know, is 40 from BlizzCon last year. That again is subject to change. So these characters are in all rare gear, roughly halfway leveled, and these are the percentages. So these percentages don't seem all that huge, which is actually really good, which means that these stats will have small impacts on your skills, the damage, and everything, but they're not super critical. It's not like if you accidentally put 5 or 10 points into one when you should put in the other, you're going to be screwed. It doesn't seem like it's going to be that way, but again, wait till we get much closer to some form of new demo or new closed beta where we can get to that point. If the system survives till then in its current iteration, and then we'll be able to actually see how much of a difference it makes by having no points versus having all the points, and then go from there. And then we continue down to how they're going to be taking the threshold mechanic that they had with angelic, demonic, ancestral, kind of taking that threshold mechanic and doing it with the new stats, but they're doing it with your class skills. So for the barbarian, for example, it says, you have your whirlwind base skill, which if you look down below, it says arsenal selection. We didn't have that at the BlizzCon 2019 demo. So this is actually a sneak peek at what the arsenal selection looks like, because we didn't have it. So all the little things you notice if you've seen all the iterations down the line and been paying attention. So that's actually pretty cool that they snuck that in there. So you see the first whirlwind upgrade, what that does, then the second whirlwind upgrade, and then you see the 150 dexterity in red, and with the following text reading, whirlwind provides a 3% movement speed boost each second while active, stacking up to 15%. So once you reach 150 dexterity, that part of that secondary part of that whirlwind upgrade unlocks, and that skill gains even more. And then you see the last whirlwind upgrade. You can read that at your own leisure. And then we go down to the sorceress ability, the last one, where it says 140 willpower. Ice blades deal additional damage to frozen targets. So what they're trying to do is give an incentive to figure out, okay, like what stats you're going to pick and how your skills can be affected. And I think that's a good start to giving a more unique flair to stats themselves, because stats themselves can be rather boring. You feel like you're just kind of plugging in the numbers. You're just kind of like, okay, I'm just going to put as many points into this because that's my damage number that I need minimum, and then everything back into life. So I can see them wanting to break that cycle that other games, even within Diablo franchise, have had, and try to give newer flair, more interesting ways of doing things. And this is a solid step towards doing that. Again, only concern is just making sure it's a tight balancing act. And I've always said any Diablo game is a tight spider web of balancing all the systems at once. If you do too much to one system, it can negatively affect way more than you thought it did. And you don't really know until 2, 3, 4 months down the line when the players kind of pick up on things, and then you have to kind of course correct, and hopefully you don't overcorrect, and you're in this like year-long development cycle just to get back where you were. So luckily, we're still early in development. They can do their internal testing and go from there. But this is at least a great first step. And I think kind of a last little point, at least on the skills, is that if they get to the point where I'm going to say, for me personally, I'm going to play a sorceress. I want to try to make a build with these 4 skills for generating and damage, and then I could just pick 2 other skills for support. I'm like, okay, out of those 4 skills, these are going to be the 2 that are going to be doing the damage that I want to work around. So it's like, okay, if I know these 2 are going to be the ones I want to make a build around, let me go to the tree, figure out where the nodes are, and then see what the upgrades are, and then figure out, okay, like these 2 are pretty good, that one's pretty good, and then these 3 are pretty good, and that should be feasible with the amount of skill points I get. So now that I have my skill tree more or less mapped out, and my skills are more or less mapped out, I can then make sure the gear I get is working towards that end, at endgame of course, and then I can actually figure out how much of the stat I want to assign as I'm leveling. It gives the player a clearer picture of what they should be doing as far as assigning their stats, picking their points, picking their upgrade paths on the tree. Clarifying the progression path for the player is huge. If it's clear enough, a lot of the hesitation in the selection of nodes, selection of skills, selection of gear get subdued, and you make it easier. It doesn't mean that those choices have less meaning. It just means that you are more secure in your decision and what you're doing. which is I think what they need to aim in. Not making the choices less meaningful, just making sure the player feels more secure in their choices. So that kind of wraps up the primary stat section. And again, like, that was my only real concern, and with everything they're doing, they're taking that what I feel personally sometimes when I see stat systems and all these node systems and the intricacies, it's like, how do I even begin building my class? But as I went through, seems like it's going to be fairly straightforward. Again, not any less difficult, but straightforward. Again, just working towards giving a player the most opportunity as possible, which is what a game should do. A game should know when to get out of its own lane and give the player as much opportunity to do what they want to do. Alright, so next we're going on the weapon types, which again, this, just like primary stats, I feel is like a bar none. Even though I didn't really notice this at first, it took, I think it was like SVR and Riker and Blood, like all those top guys, when they noticed it at the demo, and then I was like, yeah, that is pretty weird. Like what separates this weapon from that weapon? And that's what this section looks to do. So essentially, what they're doing is that they're drastically, you could say, updating how weapons work. And what I mean by that is, back in the demo, a wand was a wand. It had an attack value, and that was it. So they realized, yeah, it is pretty weird, because at that point, if a wand has an attack value, and a mace has an attack value, and a staff has an attack value, but nothing else, what's there to separate a wand from a wand from a staff, a one-handed mace from a two-handed mace, a one-handed axe from a two-handed axe? I mean, that's actually really important, especially in the coming from a D&D background, where that makes a huge amount of difference, like the amount of attacks you can do, the amount of damage it does, base-wise and everything like that. It's a huge part of what the weapon is, and it was just not there. So now they've actually reintroduced that, and they've actually come back with something better, I would say, where each weapon type will have, I've heard players use implicits from PoE. I'm not sure if I'm using that term correctly, but what they tend to call them is physical properties of the weapon. And the inherent physical property of the weapon will be the same throughout that weapon type. So all wands will have a critical strike chance, all staffs will have resource regeneration on them. The amount will be different, per type, per roll, and also the attack, how many attacks you can do. So rare staff, it says slow weapon, rare one says very fast weapon. So as you just saw, they demonstrate here. So the top is the staff, the bottom is the wand, and they're just trying to illustrate the amount of attacks you're doing through there. And granted, they're just probably using the base weapons, but you can imagine how your skill selection, your gear selection, how all that would actually drastically make the wand much faster versus the staff going through. And just again, more examples. Shields will have shield block value inherent on them. Again, this magic wand, you see that critical strike chances there, and for the rare axe, chance to inflict bleed is on there as well. So that's its physical property, and these physical properties don't take up the randomly rolled affixes that you see. So like the 6% life on kill and 12% damage to elites on the magic one, that lower list, that's what will randomly generate when you get an item one way there. Same thing for the 4% life on kill, 6% damage from elites, and the hit effect, 8% chance to execute injured non-elites. That's a weird affix. That's a new one that we haven't seen. Anyways, so that grouping is again, the randomly generated list of properties when you get an item. However, the first list is what's always going to be there. The numbers will change, but those will always be there. So, and lastly, since you know that I do artist stuff, I do the UI jobs and everything, these tooltips are mighty fine, and they make note that these are high res images of the items. So when you look at the tooltip, it's almost like you're looking directly at the weapon. It's not just some kind of half-assed done tooltip. And it's nice from my point of view personally, seeing the increasing fidelity of the tooltips in the game and the look of it and how it's all come together from a UI perspective, because that's something I enjoy and I appreciate all these examples they're giving us. And then we move on to item qualities. Okay, just go ahead. I did read this section, just trying to make sure where we're going. Okay, so this is where they were talking about, item qualities, what they want to try to execute, trying to balance that progression path, like, common, magic, rare, legendaries, but then, like, should legendaries be the end-all be-all, and how far they should go back as far as balancing it, so legendaries aren't always a choice, but could be in certain situations. That struggle that we've gone through really since the game was announced, and they were talking about itemization from your different point of views, from someone from the Diablo 2 days, someone coming maybe from PoE, versus someone who, like myself, only really played Diablo 3, and all our perspectives and how to try to satisfy them all. Maybe not 100%, but give something that satisfies everybody as best as possible. So what they're saying is that they're increasing the potential power on individual affixes on magic items, that they're increasing the number of affixes on rare and better items, and then this last line drops like two big bombshells, even though they may have been mentioned before in the beginning of the feedback, is that legendary affixes now roll randomly. Yes, really. So as you see here in the, again, nice spiffy updated tooltip, the Staff of Earthen Strength, knockdown enemies take 46% additional damage from your attack. This legendary power is no longer tied to this staff and this staff only. This legendary power will be able to roll on any legendary. Now at first that sounds horrific, because it's like, what if I need that legendary power? And again, we the players tend to always view things in the lack. It's like, but if I don't have it, my build is crap, so therefore this whole system is crap. But what this cleverly does, and this was what turned my perspective almost 100 degrees on the very similar idea of what the consumable object was, I think 2 or 3 updates ago, where you'd be able to take a consumable object with a legendary power and throw it on a rare, essentially making a custom legendary that you knew that you're like, okay, this is the rare I like, and I'll wear. Here's the legendary power that I got, and I want to put them together, because for me, if I do this, it will allow me to put on this piece of gear and this piece of gear that I can only do in this configuration with these items as they are, and I'll be able to make this really unique build that I created only for me. That's what they're doing with this. So now you'll have these legendary items that any item can roll with any legendary affix. There'll still be class specific legendary affixes that will roll, of course. But it's just great because now when you get a legendary item in Diablo 4, it's a surprise every single time. It's not like how it is in Diablo 3 where you see the red beam come up, be like, oh my god, I got a primal! And then that 2 seconds of excitement goes down the tubes when you look at the 3D model and you see it's like, oh, it's a cluck eye. So before you've even identified it, before you even see how good of a weapon or item it is, you know it's already vendor trash at that point. But with this, it's like, oh, it's a two-handed staff. Like you're playing a sorcerer, it's like, oh, it's a two-handed staff, legendary. Let me see what this is. Because you just don't know what the legendary power is. You don't know what that item can unlock. And that is huge. Because as I said before and in other feedbacks, opportunity is what this game needs to give to the player. That's the first and foremost thing this game really needs to give. It needs to be opportunity. The game has to kind of get out of its own way and make sure the player has that opportunity, and this is a perfect example of that. This is a simple change. The game is literally saying, alright, you're going to get a legendary, you're going to get a random power affix on it, and then it's up to you to decide if you want it or not. Perfect. Like, it is so simple, so perfect, that it's great. Like, I can't say anything more about it, and then without basically triplicating what I've just said. So the last part of that sentence also says, and unique items will replace mythics. But to clarify, as I talk about uniques down there, mythics aren't bye-bye. They're still kind of tinkering with them, but for right now, just until we know, we don't know. So unique items are back. So we already kind of, I'll show this on the screen for a little bit, even though we already kind of talked about this. And okay, they kind of did demonstrate this a little bit. So if you look at the first 2 items, you see boots, you see a chest piece, but you see the same legendary affix. So this is a clear example of what I just brought up in just a few moments ago, as well as the boots of Chilling Frost, the 3rd item, and then the 4th item being the amulet, having again the same legendary power. So you can really see how you could really just mix and match your items to make the build you want. You're not being artificially constrained in that sense. So I'll touch on that, and now we'll jump over to uniques. Now uniques are those items that you'll only be able to have, as you can see on the lower right hand corner, is that it says I cannot salvage, limit 1 equipped, cannot salvage for the 2nd item. It actually has the class druid, limit 1 equipped, so on and so forth. But yeah, it's like uniques are back. They'll have their own really true customized effects on them. They're taking extra I don't want to say extra precautions. They're going extra lengths. There's the wording for you, to really make sure these items really stand out, not just in their stats, none of what they do, but also the visual looks as well, which is always a great thing. And it's just nice because now there's an entirely new tier for us to go after. And again, say you really want this staff, and now that legendaries roll with their powers randomly, you can really tweak and refine down your gearing path, let alone your skills and your stats. So they're really drilling down on, I think, on what a lot of people want. You're not going to satisfy everybody, but they're getting there, and I feel like this is not just an incredible start, but like I feel like they're really on their way. And again, as they've said pretty much with every blog post, all the items they're showing are around level 20. So again, about halfway through the game with the currently known level cap of 40. So there's not much else to go through here. So I just wanted to, I pretty much gave all my either concerns or feedback as we were going through here. But since sets, as I said before, weren't touched on really at all, I know I've given my idea for what sets could be in the past, but it's kind of hard to imagine it unless you kind of have like an example in front of you. So I'm just gonna add, this is what I wish sets would be in Diablo 4, especially with knowing what they're doing now. It seems like sets are kind of being, at least from my perspective, it seems like sets can still have a role, but that role is being more and more confined as like uniques come in and legendaries with their randomly rolling legendary affix and the way stats are interacting with your skills, so on and so forth. So it's like, what could we do with sets to make them intriguing yet not interfere with what they're already doing? So going to Diablo 3, this is what an Ogchild spike, basically the helm, looks like. So first off, I'm just using this as an example. Don't get hung up on the fact that it's the headpiece. In fact, in Diablo 4, my initial idea for sets in Diablo 4 would be bring back the waist, bring back the wrist, and I would want to say bring back the shoulders, but they did mention how they didn't want to do the shoulder slot because of the cosmetic look of gear, that shoulders are kind of a pain in the ass. And I agree with that. It's coming from World of Warcraft, where orcs had to deal with overly small shoulders for how long that was, for like almost a year it was back in the day. So bring back another slot that doesn't really require any form of transmogrification. So a new slot that's developed, maybe a talisman or something, whatever. But it has to be 3 slots. So basically your belt, your wrist, and X third slot. And those 3 slots would be for set items only. So now those 3 slots are for sets only. The other slots are for the other items. You don't have to worry about balancing out, like, okay, well, if I have these 3 set pieces, I can't have these pieces. Like, we can have differentiation in there. And and then the obvious retort is, well, then you're getting rid of meaningful choice, which means you're just gonna have everything. It's like, if I just left the idea at that, then yes, I would agree, but we could also build in meaningful choices within what set pieces you take, and I'll demonstrate that right now. So again, don't get strung up on this is a helm piece. I already gave the slots, I already gave how we're going to make these meaningful choices. So right now, currently, the way we're used to sets working is that down here you see 2 set, reduced damage taken by 15%, increased damage dealt by 30% for the 2-piece, and for the 3-piece you see reduced damage from elites by 30%, increased damage against elites by 30%. That's how we're used to sets working. What I'm proposing in Diablo 4 is that the 2 set and the 3 set, because again, we're going to have 3 items, so therefore you're going to go up to the 3 set bonus and a 2 set bonus prior, is that the 2 set bonus area has a pool of 3 different things that could be there, and when the item is rolled, it selects 1 at random. And for the 3 set bonus, there's 3 properties there, and when the item rolls, 1 of them at random will roll there. So within an item, for the 2 set, you can get 1 of 3 possibilities, and for the 3 set, you can get 1 of 3 possibilities. So this piece, if you were to create it in the Diablo 4 system, will look something more like this. For the 2 set, this version rolled with the increased damage dealt by 30% and the reduced damage from elites by 30% for the 3 piece. So you're like, oh, I got like halfway there. I like the increased damage dealt by 30%, but for the 3-piece, the reduced damage, I don't need that because I have other skills that give me more than enough damage reduction. So I'm safe. So this piece gets me halfway there. So I'll keep this one for now, but I'm still going to keep my eye out for another one just like it, but the 3-piece happens to roll the other one I know it can roll, but has it on this one. And then we get to this version, which has the increased damage dealt by 30% for the 2-piece, but for the 3-piece has the increased damage against the least by 30%. And you go, yes, this is the one I need. This is it rolled the right property for the 2 set, and it rolled the right property for the 3 set. This is the one I need. So when you put this one on, you get both those properties roll. So that's how I would do it. Now, the weird thing is like, okay, if each item is going to roll differently, you're going to be stacking stuff. You're going to be potentially stacking increased damage dealt by 30%, 30%. Don't get worried about the percents because, again, these are Diablo 3 numbers and they're all scaled up to hell. The developers will know the numbers to put in there to make them all feasible and everything like that. So at this point, you're kind of going like, well, Dread, why do you want sets to be this way? Why not interfering with the rest of the gear, the legendary sneaks? Because in my mind, I feel sets are the best sets in Diablo 3 are the ones that are utilities, that act as a utility support for the real items you want to play. So your Captain Crimson's, your oh god, I'm having one of those senior moments, but that's what I'm going with. It's your Captain Crimson is not a set you would roll with by itself, but it's a support to other items and even other sets. So that's what I feel sets should be in Diablo 4. They should be unique, customizable support to the rest of your build. And that should be their focus going forward. So, again, it's not the perfect example, but I figured this would be a much easier way of understanding what the idea in its reform that I had for sets. So, again, this was Joe Shelley wrote the bulk of this post, and we'll kind of bring it up to here. So yeah, I mean that's about it. Overall, summation is that I like a lot of what they're doing. There's still a few things to be lightly concerned about, but a lot of those concerns for me won't be quelled until eventually we get another playable demo or we're in that closed beta stage where basically we, the players, can kind of give true feedback because we're seeing how all the things they're doing are interacting with the overall game as a whole, and then you can really get into that fine tweaking aspect of it all. So that's about it for this go around. Now we're almost at the end of the year, so have a good Christmas if you're finishing up your Hanukkah and Kwanzaa and all that. Have a good holiday there, and also have a good New Year, and see you on the other side when we get there. That's it for me right now. Hope you enjoyed this feedback. And if you'd like to see more, you can catch me on BlizzPro.com, where I do all the news-related stuff, as well as DressLife.com, which is where I post these dev blogs, development hell blogs, as well as my own personal blogs there. So again, thank you for listening and watching this feedback, and look forward to doing more in the coming new year. Have a good night, folks.